this is Audra, just checking audio.
Oh, hello, Audra. We can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good morning, staff.
I can hear you, John.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Hello, everyone. I just want to test my microphone, make sure my voice is good.
Yeah, this is Craig Hughes. Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you, Craig.
Hey, Craig, will we see participants no matter how they join, whether it's through YouTube or Zoom, or do we only see?
Yeah, YouTube we will not see
Got it. Okay, thanks.
because they're just reviewing it as viewers.
Mhm.
Yeah, we will see the view count on YouTube, but we won't see individual users.
Got it. Hello? Hello, was that you, Marcy?
That's me. Sorry, I was answering a phone call. I thought I was on.
I thought you were testing to see if your audio worked, which it does.
Yay, okay. I'll be cognizant of that.
Okay.
Good morning. This is Jorge Gastelum with El Mirage.
Good morning.
I only gonna have audio, not the video.
Okay.
Also, Mike Weaver with Apache Junction.
Thank you.
Robert Yavis, City of Tempe.
Andy Smith with Pinal County.
Good morning, Joshua Plum with the City of Maricopa.
Good morning. And we will do a roll call start when we get the meeting going. So you don't have to introduce yourself, though I do appreciate the introductions. morning, everyone. This is Steph Stearns. We will just give it another minute or two for people to log on. All right, hello. Mario, it looks like we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steph. Good morning, members of the MAG TRC. So before we start, I just want to go over a few things, some housekeeping items, given our first meeting here on Zoom as a TRC. Of course, the standard quorum is required at all times for us to keep going. Our quorum requirement is 14 committee members. For the course of the meeting, when you need to speak, you're going to need to turn your mic on and clearly state who you are prior to speaking so that we know who's speaking, and if there are any members of the audience, they can hear you. But otherwise, please keep your microphones muted. And so we will be taking a roll call vote for each action item on the agenda today. An opportunity was provided for public comment ahead of the meeting, and my understanding is that we did not receive any comments. Steph, is that correct?
That is correct. No comments were received.
Okay. All right, so we will now begin with a roll call of all the members of the meeting. And again, I'll call you out, and if you can just unmute while you let us know if you're on the call. Start with Apache Junction, Michael Weaver.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. From ADOT, Greg Byers. Okay, Avondale, David Jennifer. All right, Buckeye, Scott Lowe.
I'm here.
Thank you. Cave Creek, Hal Maron. Chandler, Ryan Peters. El Mirage, Jorge Gastelum.
I'm here.
Thank you. Federal Highway, Edward Stillings. Okay. Florence, Christopher Salas. Fountain Hills, Randy Harrell. Gila River Indian Community, Tim Oliver.
I'm here.
Thank you. Gilbert, Rob Bohr.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Glendale, Trevor Ebersol.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Goodyear, Luke Albert for Samit Mohan.
Albert, yeah.
Okay. From Guadalupe, Bob Thaxton. Litchfield Park, Woodrow Scouten. City of Maricopa, Josh Plum.
I'm here.
Thank you. County Department of Transportation, Steve Wilcox.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mesa, RJ Zeter.
Here.
Thank you. Paradise Valley, Paul Mood.
Here.
Thank you. Peoria, Adina Lund.
Here.
Thank you. Pinal County, Andy Smith.
I'm here.
Thank you. Queen Creek, Troy White.
Here.
Thank you. Scottsdale, Dan Worth.
I'm here.
Thank you. Surprise, Mike Gent.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Tempe, Robert Yabes. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
It's okay. Yabes.
Yabes.
I'm
Thank you.
here.
Tollison, Jamie McCracken. Valley Metro, Jen Pine.
Good morning. I'm here.
Morning, thank you. Wickenburg, Herschel Workman. Youngtown, Grant Anderson.
Here.
Okay, thank you all so much. That gets us through our first roll call.
Mr. Chairman, Ryan Peters from Chandler just logged on. I think I got missed.
Okay, we've got Ryan Peters. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, that takes us to item 2. Item 2 is the Transportation Policy and Planning Director is going to give us a report on some general activities. I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Review Committee. I know it's been a few months since the committee has met, so it's great to be back. I want to let the committee know that over the last couple months, MAG staff has been teleworking. We've continued to push our planning studies forward and the development of our next regional transportation plan. I know that Audra will be providing a presentation later in the agenda. We've also been coordinating with our partners at ADOT on the anticipated revenue impacts this pandemic has had on WRF and HERF collections. John Bolin will be touching on this item on agenda item number 4. He will provide an overview and an update of where we stand today. I do have a few additional updates for the committee. I was going to welcome Somat Mohan, the engineering director for the city of Goodyear. He'll be the new TRC rep. I know that Luke Albert is filling in for him today, so thank you, Luke. A memo was sent out on May 7th to the MAG Management, TRC, Active Transportation, and Street Committee, letting the members know that the fiscal year 2021 Design Assistance for Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities call for projects is now open. And applications must be submitted to MAG by 10 a.m. Friday, July 10th, 2020. Please note that late applications will not be accepted. For more information on this item, please contact Jason Stevens, MAG staff after the meeting. You can also find more information on the MAG Active Transportation Committee website. Also, I want to remind the committee that if you have a fiscal year 2020 project with Federal Highway Administration funding programmed, project submittals are due at ADOT on or before June 1st, 2020. If you have any questions on this item, please contact Steve Tate. And last, the ALCP policies and procedures require that lead agencies submit an annual progress report for projects programmed for work and/or reimbursement in the current fiscal year. This helps MAG staff understand the progress of the project, especially if there are concerns with it moving forward. MAG staff can then assist with strategies on reimbursements and/or opportunities for substitution of a project in the next fiscal year. Kristen Myers sent out an email last week to the ALCP working group. We would be happy to assist our member agencies on answering any questions regarding this process. Kristen can be reached by email at kmyers@azmag.gov. That's KMYERS@azmag.gov. Mr. Chair, that completes my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. Does anybody have any questions?
I know questions, but this is Dave Janover from Avondale, and I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. All right, so that takes us to the next item, item 3, which is the approval of our consent agenda. For the benefit of everybody on the call, I'm gonna go ahead and read just the title of each of those, and then we'll be open to taking a motion unless somebody would like a presentation or has any questions for any of the items. 3A is the approval of the January 30th, 2020 minutes. 3B is Transportation Improvement Program project changes. 3C is the draft fiscal year 2020 program of projects and working draft fiscal year 21 program of projects. 3D is the draft MAG Title VI and Environmental Justice fiscal year 21 program document. 3E is draft fiscal year 21 arterial life cycle program. 3F is extension of Proposition 400 regional arterial system review. Does any member of the committee have questions or would like any presentation on any of those items? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. This is Buckeye.
Second, Mesa.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And I will. Do a roll call. Again, remember to unmute and respond and go ahead and mute back. So we'll start with Apache Junction, Michael Weber.
Aye.
Avondale, Dave Janiver.
Aye.
Buckeye, Scott Lowe.
Aye.
Chandler, Ryan Peters.
Aye.
El Mirage, Jorge Gastelum.
Aye.
Gila River, Tim Oliver.
Aye.
Gilbert, Rob Bohr. Glendale, Trevor Abersall.
Aye.
Goodyear, Luke Albert.
Aye.
Maricopa, Josh Plum. Josh, are you still there?
Yes. Aye. Aye.
Okay. McDOT, Steve Wilcox.
Aye.
Mesa, RJ Zeter.
Aye.
Paradise Valley, Paul Mood. Paul.
Aye.
Thank you. Peoria, Adina Lund.
Aye.
Pinell County, Andy Smith.
Aye.
Queen Creek, Troy White.
Aye.
Scottsdale, Dan Worth.
Aye.
Surprise, Mike Gent.
Aye.
Tempe, Robert Yabis.
Aye.
Valley Metro, Jen Pine.
Aye.
Youngtown, Grant Anderson.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. All right, unanimously approved. Thank you all so much. That takes us to item 4, which is going to be a presentation by Mr. John Bullen, the MAG Transportation Economic and Finance Program Manager. And we'll turn it over to you, John.
John, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC. Happy to be here today. Try and be agenda item in the interest of time, but certainly would be happy to answer any question. Next, please. So the Freeway Lifecycle Program is 3 lifecycle programs that have evolved out of the Proposition 400 program. It's our management tool to see the implementation of those projects. And the program was last approved back in the specifically by Regional Council on September 25th, 2019. You might recall that that's the culmination of the rebalancing effort that extended through most of the fiscal year 2019. As part of the rebalance effort, we made a commitment to program annually. This agenda item represents first annual update. Next slide, please. So program revenues come from three primary sources. Of course, we have the half-cent funding. The majority of that does go into the Freeway program. We also have a portion of the highway user revenue fund that flow to the MAG region, as well as a portion of ADOT federal funds.
You cut out. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. That better, Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC?
Hello, is there anybody there?
I can hear you just fine, John.
John, this is Mario. I can hear you. So I'm not sure who is it that's unable to hear.
That's
Mr.
great.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'll resume my presentation.
Okay.
I know that there's some bandwidth issues. I'll stop the video as well. As I had noted, program revenue comes from three primary sources. So the sales tax, portion of the highway user revenue funds, as well as ADOT federal funds. Two of these are from the HERF. We go through an update all model that developed with new inputs, and a panel of economists goes through its projection for the future. So the cost of funds, on the other hand, largely uses within the Federal Transportation Act and then projects that out. I do want to note that here, the fiscal year 2021 Freeway program is based on news that were generated last fall. So the implication there is that these revenue estimates are pre-COVID pandemic. So at the end of the presentation, I will touch on what some of the potential implications from COVID will be on the program. Next slide. So as part of the rebalance effort last year, we also made a commitment to work with ADOT, their program management consultant, to generate updated cost estimates at least twice a year. This really enables us to track variances in material pricing, right-of-way pricing, and make sure that we really have the latest and greatest as part of the program. So, the draft 2021 program project costs were updated in January of this year, reflecting bid emissions of 2019. Again, similar theme in that these were pre-COVID cost estimates. Next slide, please. So there haven't been too many changes in the draft 2021 program, given that we just the 2020 program back in September. I did want to highlight a few of them. Changes is actually that we've moved away from a constant dollar program to a year of expenditure model. And we have built in construction right-of-way cost inflation factors that will be updated every year. The construction cost inflation factors I would classify as fairly aggressive. So between 4.5% and 5%, which as we later will actually help us as we navigate through some of the challenges caused by COVID. There's also been several updates to projects. One brief those. If you recall, earlier this year, we had discussed a potential material change to N between State 85 and Broadway. Following the management committee presentation, MAG, the city of Buckeye, as well as ADOT worked hard to analyze all the alternatives, identify what could be done. Ultimately, the project with just several of the inner items, and as a result, delivery of that project has been deferred from 2020 to 2020. As widening between 202 and then ultimately 587 down in Pinal County moves forward with its study process, We've also updated several elements in the Maricopa County portion of that project. Those elements, which again are based on the technical study, as well as coordination with the Gila River community, have been reflected in the updated program. Design for 2 projects has also been accelerated. The thought here is that both of those projects were actually ready to be in design and provide us an opportunity to develop shovel-ready projects should the stimulus funding be available. Sure, the program can take advantage of it. Next. So combining the updated revenue forecast that were generated last fall with the new construction costs, you can see the program fund balance. At the end of the program, we end with approximately $300 million fund balance. What's not reflected on here is the minimum fund balance that would be required. The good news is that we're still $200 million above that guidance. Which again, because this does not incorporate any of the revenue impacts caused by COVID, we're in a really good position, at least in the near term, to be able to sustain a loss in revenues. Next slide, please. So looking forward, as I had noted throughout the presentation, the program itself was largely developed pre-COVID. Transportation requires that we develop things in advance to move through the conformity process. The program itself was completed in February of 2020. March revenue collections are down 8.5%. That's the first month worth of data that we've actually received. ADOT Finance has generated some preliminary revenue estimates. Really, I would classify these revenue estimates, I don't want to call them speculative, but ADOT not able to utilize any data generating them. So they were a bit of a best guess scenario. They are anticipating fairly substantive decreases for the balance of fiscal year 2020. As well as significant decreases in 2021. Even with these updated revenues, our program remains in balance through the end of 2023. So the good news is that we don't need to immediately. We'll have an opportunity to monitor short-term revenues and then ultimately react in the future. I think one of the hopes or one of the beliefs is that with the decrease in revenue, we're anticipating to see some relief in construction pricing. So not only were the construction prices used to develop the program fairly high themselves, we built in significant inflation costs. So presumably those will go down and will offset some of the revenues. So I think we're cautiously optimistic that the program is in good shape moving forward. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, John. Are there any questions for John before we entertain a motion on this item?
Mr. Chairman, this is Scott Lowe from Buckeye.
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, you know, it seems like, and this is just my opinion, it seems like all of the people who are making predictions are looking at worst case scenarios. I mean, 15% decrease in HERF in the next 2 years, that just seems like a huge worst case scenario. I mean, especially, you know, we just looked at our building permits here in Buckeye, and of course, we're still growing, but we're still at record levels as for single family homes, which means people are still moving to Arizona. I don't, you know, so anyway, just a comment, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any other comments or questions?
I have a question, Adina from Peoria.
Yes, Adina.
I was just wondering if John had any information on their guess that decreases in right-of-way and construction costs will happen. Is there any guidance from ADOT or MAG or McDOT as to where that's coming from? Because we've heard mixed things over here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, good question. So that's been a topic that we've been discussing with the team actually. So had the opportunity to have a discussion with a infrastructure delivery consultant, as well as one of the staff economists, sort of speculating about what might happen. As you mentioned, nobody knows at this point in time. I think we're very closely plugged into several projects which are set to bid in June, and believe that will give us an insight really to where the market's going to go. So fortunately, we're in the position where we don't need to make any big changes, both on the revenue and the cost side, because the program's in good shape in the near term. And through the fall, we can really monitor this. We'd like to share that information comes in.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? Okay. The action requested is for a recommendation of approval of the draft fiscal year 21 Freeway Life Cycle Program contingent on a finding of air quality conformity. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve. This is Mesa.
Thank you.
Peoria, second.
Thank you very much. Okay, here we go on the roll call. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Michael Weaver.
Aye.
David Janover.
Aye.
Scott Lowe.
Aye.
Ryan Peters.
Aye.
Jorge Gastelum.
Aye.
Timothy Oliver.
Aye.
Rob Bohr.
Aye.
Trevor Ebersol.
Aye.
Luke Albert.
Aye.
Josh Plum.
Aye.
Steve Wilcox.
Aye.
RJ Zeter.
Aye.
Paul Mood.
Aye.
Adina Lund.
Aye.
Andy Smith.
Aye.
Troy White.
Aye.
Dan Worth.
Aye.
Mike Gent.
Aye.
Robert Yabes.
Aye.
Jen Pine.
Aye.
Grant Anderson.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Again, we have a unanimous vote on item 4. All right, thank you, everybody. That takes us to item 5, which is the Diamond Grind pilot program. This is also an action item. It will be presented also by John Bullen. And so I'll turn it back over to you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC. I switched over to my phone, so hopefully it's a little clearer than it had been. Next slide, please. So for some context, today's presentation is to discuss the Diamond Grind pilot program. So this is an item that unfortunately we had intended on providing some information on the front end back in March, following discussions with both the RTP Management Committee work group as well as the Management Committee. But due to the COVID pandemic, we had to put that aside. However, we did provide some information in a subsequent mail out. So if the first half of this presentation is a bit redundant, or if you've read or heard it before, my apologies, but felt it was important to give some context into the issue that we're discussing today, and really why the Management Committee provided some of the recommendations that they did. And then we'll conclude by talking a little bit about what the pilot program that we intend on rolling out will be. Next slide, please. So, concerns in the early 2000s, when the loop freeway system was really being constructed, really centered around freeway noise. Many of the neighborhoods that were adjacent to the new freeways obviously went from having no freeways to having freeways. And so there's a lot of pressure on ADOT to really begin to investigate ways to mitigate some of these noise efforts. Ultimately, the decision was made to go with a rubberized asphalt overlay that covered the system. Those of us that are, those of you that are engineers are familiar with its more technical term. I also will use quiet pavement or quiet pave sort of interchangeably throughout the presentation. But just to make sure that we're clear, it's sort of synonymous, one and the same. Next slide, please. So as we've been developing the system and building out the system, we've included rubberized asphalt as a scope item in all our capital projects. So today, if you were to look at the freeway system, nearly the entirety of it is covered in the rubberized asphalt overlay, as you can see on the screen, with only a few exceptions. The northern portion of the 303, which is not yet fully built out, as well as State Route 143. Next slide, please. So the challenge is that while we included rubberized asphalt as a project scope item, no funding was identified for its replacement. So as it was installed in many of these projects, it's aged over time. In fact, really the only time that rubberized asphalt has been replaced is when we've had another capital project come in to widen or improve that facility. So as you can see on the screen, many sections of rubberized asphalt are quite old. Also, as you're familiar, as pavement ages, it deteriorates. And so that's resulting in many of the potholes that we're seeing, many of the chipping, and then certainly exacerbated by the rain a couple of years back. In fact, approximately 50% of our system has rubberized asphalt that is greater than 10 years, with 10 years being the expected life of rubberized asphalt. Next slide, please. So as part of our effort, we looked at a number of different metrics, and for simplicity's sake, we combined those into a very simple metric, which we just classify simply as failing. If you read the report itself, you can see measures on cracking and roughness and whatnot. But for purposes of simplicity, we wanted to highlight those sections which we're classifying as failing. Next slide, please. And then combining both the age of the rubberized asphalt with its condition, we developed a map that really identifies where the needs are in terms of how we would sequence its replacement. As you can see on the screen, the challenge is there's a lot of replacement needed. And as we'll talk a little bit later, rubberized asphalt isn't cheap. So that presents challenges, and ultimately it presents this region with a policy decision about how we want to move forward. Next slide, please. So in order to get a better understanding of the condition of rubberized asphalt throughout the system, as well as some of the potential trade-offs, we actually partnered with ADOT on what we call the noise reduction analysis. Next slide, please. And so this gave us some perspective to some of the trade-offs between rubberized asphalt and then some of the concrete-based alternatives. Those of you that travel on the 101 up in the north section might notice that the section that's under construction right now actually features a couple pavement test sections. Those pavement test sections are what's reflected on the screen. ADOT has actually gone out and put diamond grind treatment too on portions of the 202 down in the Southeast Valley. Next slide, please. So we had presented the report to the RTP Management Committee work group back in March. I would characterize the discussion as very good. A lot of interest in the topic. I believe it lasted approximately an hour and a half or so. And then we also presented to the MAG Management Committee. And the objective there was to get direction on how we move this issue forward, knowing that a decision is going to need to be made and there are costs associated with that decision. Next slide, please. So much like everything, there's trade-offs. And so with rubberized asphalt, the big focus there is that it is very effective at reducing freeway noise. However, over time, its impact on freeway noise actually diminishes, such that by the end of rubberized asphalt's life, the sound reduction qualities are actually equal to, or in some cases, worse than some of the concrete-based treatments available. Concrete-based treatments, on the other hand, are much more stable. So while they don't have quite the noise reduction capabilities on the front end, they don't change a whole lot over time. And so I just want to illustrate two different categories on this chart. We have rubberized asphalt, which is all the way on the left side, and then diamond grind, which is really the sort of preferred or recommended treatment moving forward in the middle. Next slide, please. So this chart is intended to provide some trade-off perspectives. Of course, I touched on the noise level already. With rubberized asphalt, it actually has a bit of a cheaper initial installation cost. That's in part driven by how the system was designed. So as we've built our system, we've designed it assuming that there's going to be a rubberized asphalt overlay. And so some of the bridge joints, for instance, don't exactly line up. However, if you consider things from a life cycle perspective, concrete-based surface treatments are much cheaper. And then road smoothness, certainly a factor, certainly one of the primary issues with rubberized asphalt right now. As you're driving over treated concrete, little change over time. It's a very smooth surface. But as rubberized asphalt ages, it is not so smooth. Next slide, please. So the intent of this chart is to really give perspective to two of the primary focus points, which would be the noise level of the treatment, and then what the cost of that treatment would be. Again, trying to break it out on a initial cost as well as a system-wide cost. So as you can see, over a 25-year period, the gap between using a diamond grind treatment versus rubberized asphalt treatment is over $300 million, which is significant. And so ultimately, discussion at management committee, really felt that diamond grind was a worthwhile method to at least try out and see how it works with the regional system. Next slide, please. So now I want to touch a little bit on what we're proposing today and what we're seeking your recommended approval for, which is the pilot program. Next slide, please. So as I had noted, we received direction from management committee to explore what projects might be good candidates for a concrete-based treatment. So we've been working diligently with ADOT since then, taking into account a number of factors, primarily what the underlying pavement condition would be, because diamond grind can't be used on concrete that needs rehabilitation. And so how to be cognizant of those factors. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we've identified 3 different projects that includes widening to the 101 up in the Northwest Valley between 75th Avenue and I-17, widening to the 101 in the Northeast Valley between I-17 and Pima, and then widening to the 101 in the Southeast Valley between Baseline and 202. I do want to note that both the 101 between I-17 and Pima and the 101 between Baseline and 202 are actually under construction now. So with rubberized asphalt, there's very defined paving windows for which the contractor has to do all of the paving in. And with the spring paving window upon us, decision needs to be made immediately. So
Fortunately, we were able to work with the adjacent member agencies in those areas to make sure that there's a comfort level. And then with the third project, the 101 widening between 75th Avenue and I-17, that's one of the projects that is just starting design now. Next slide, please. So once the diamond grind is out, ADOT's going to be able to assess a number of things. So they're going to take a look at things in terms of what the potential life cycle costs are, what the maintenance needs are, try and project those out and compare them to rubberized asphalt. There's a quality of ride aspect to it too. And then a big one, public acceptance of a concrete surface. So with the change from rubberized asphalt to concrete, it's a completely different look. And so that's a factor. And I will note that the public has seemingly responded very positively to the 202 down in the Southeast Valley. So what we're seeking today is just formal approval to modify those project scopes to replace rubberized asphalt with diamond grind, and then also some assurance that, you know, if for one reason or the other, the region decides to move away from diamond grind and return to rubberized asphalt, that the region would identify capital funding to provide that rubberized asphalt overlay. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, let's get started on any questions for John.
I have one. This is Grant from Youngtown.
Okay, go ahead, Grant.
Thank you. Have you compared your test areas with the EIS that required noise walls based upon a certain level of noise when the freeways were originally constructed?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, so that's a good question. So in fact, while rubberized asphalt is actually able to reduce sound noise, ADOT did some work with FHWA to try and determine whether or not that would qualify as a formal mitigation measure. And ultimately it does not. So while the region...
I agree it does not, but regular pavement does. And your analysis showed that regular pavement had a less initial noise than your diamond grind. So I was just wondering if that will cause an issue with the noise walls that are currently built that either need to be raised or increased or something of that nature.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, ADOT did not determine that would be needed. Again, going back to the issue of what counts as a mitigation measure and what doesn't, but that's certainly something that ADOT has considered, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, Scott Lowe.
Okay, Scott.
Hey, yeah, I think one of the key points you made, John, in this was that though we put in all this rubberized asphalt, ADOT hasn't made any provision for maintenance. So over the course of time, when the rubberized asphalt becomes the same decibel level as the diamond grade, then I guess to Grant's point, then we have the same noise issues. So. And with respect to this, now the diamond grade only has a 15-year life. Is ADOT then going to program for the maintenance of these, because we're going to have to maintain these noise levels at a certain point, especially if it relates back to the original NEPA study.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, so that's a good point. You know, part of the challenge there is really the distinction between what represents capital work and what represents maintenance work. So when it comes to substantive pavement overhauls, like installation of a new layer of rubberized asphalt, you know, that falls into the capital element, which is the responsibility of the Freeway program, you know, given that it also comprises funds federal funds as well as HERF funds. So the maintenance of potential diamond grind is certainly something that we'll work on with ADOT. And as we put together the extension of Proposition 400, take into consideration some of those life cycle elements and the cost to maintain our infrastructure and make sure that we have a plan in place that will keep our system robust for years to come.
This is Andy Smith with Pinal County. You're on the hot seat. Did ADOT do any kind of safety analysis between the rubberized and the diamond grooves as far as the traction?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, this is Andy Smith with Pinal County.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, good question. So as part of this effort, it was really intended to be a high-level planning effort to weigh some of the trade-offs. That being said, ADOT has I think a high degree of comfort that a diamond ground surface is just as safe as a rubberized asphalt surface, but certainly until we start putting some of this in, we won't know for certain. That being said, I will say that diamond grinding is actually quite common elsewhere throughout the country. In fact, it's quite common throughout Texas, as an example, as their overlay treatment of choice.
Mr. Chair, this is Trevor Ebersol with Glendale.
Okay, go ahead, Trevor.
John, thank you for the presentation. My question is in the form of funding. Can you talk a little bit about the funding for the I-17 and I-10 segments? My understanding is that there's different buckets of money received for the interstate system, and would there be a proportionate share of those different buckets associated with this rubberized asphalt or diamond grinding associated for or with I-17 and I-10? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC. So, that gets into, issues related to funding in the MAG area, and really, I think funding policy. So MAG is the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're actually responsible for programming all funding throughout the entirety of the region. And so, as I had noted in the FLCP presentation, the portion of federal transportation funds that would be that are allocated to the MAG region, if you will, are controlled through the Freeway Lifecycle Program. Similarly for the portion of highway user revenue funds. So as we put together that program and really determine priorities, I think it's incumbent upon us as the regional planning agency to weigh the alternatives. So, for interstate work in of itself, from time to time, there's some additional non-formulatic funding that comes in to really primarily for big infrastructure lifts. But for an ongoing basis, the formulaic funding that flows to ADOT and then is controlled by MAG through the Freeway Lifecycle Program is really intended to address those issues.
This is Grant from Youngtown again.
Grant.
Thank you. According to your cost slide, the corridor costs are based on a new situation, whereas if you're redoing areas, you need to have a removal and replacement cost associated with your diamond grind versus the rubberized asphalt. I'm not sure what your graph says does not reflect all those, so to speak, additional costs.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, Mr. Anderson. So I think this is getting into some of the upfront capital costs associated with the switch between rubberized asphalt and diamond grinding. So as I had noted, much of the system was actually designed for that rubberized asphalt overlay. And so, as we get to bridge joints, they're not lined up to be exact, for instance, because there's a layer of rubberized asphalt that goes over them. So, as we make that initial switch, there's some capital investment there that actually necessitates some additional work to get the surface to be able to accommodate the diamond grind treatment. That being said, with the two projects that are under construction now, as ADOT has been working with the contractor, they've been able to negotiate a change order for $0 or very close to. So, I think if initial indications point to anything, it's that we've had some success there. Although I will note that moving forward, we certainly have to be cognizant of the underlying concrete condition, and diamond grind isn't a tool for every facility. In particular, if you look at something like the I-17 with its base that was constructed, 50 years ago, wouldn't be able to support it.
I just want to make sure that I'm sorry, just a follow-up. I just want to make sure that the diamond grind really will be cheaper versus with an existing freeway replacement versus just continuing with rubberized asphalt every 10 years. That life cycle just seems to be a pretty small difference in total costs.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, that is something that we will definitely keep an eye on. And in part, that issue itself is why we want to roll this out as a pilot program rather than a complete revamp of project scopes throughout the entirety of the region. So as we move forward, we'll certainly be attentive to that issue.
This is Mike Jant, City of Surprise. Hey, Mike. It sounds like this pilot program is well justified, and appreciate it. Along with the earlier request to add in some safety comparisons to ADOT's assessment of the pilot program, I was wondering if you might be able to include environmental sustainability comparisons as well, greenhouse gas emissions, fuel consumption, all those in the production and installation of the material, as well as maintenance that's required, so that there's a way to assess the different environmental impacts of the different products.
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, certainly. That's actually an item that we're working on with the ADOT Research Center now to determine what diamond grind impact would be on air quality. So that's something that we've identified and are certainly watching. But good comment. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? John, I just have a couple of questions as it relates to the pilot itself. One is, Andy brought up the point about safety. Is that something that you can build into your assessment during the pilot to see whether there's any difference or safety, maybe looking at, even just accidents or some kind of measure that relates to safety?
Mr. Chairman, that's certainly something that we will work with ADOT to and figure out how we can accomplish that. Definitely. Thank you. Okay.
And then my second question is, how are you going to measure the public acceptance?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, so there wasn't an intent on producing any sort of formal metric for that. I think it's largely going to be driven by the feedback that ADOT gets. As I had noted pretty early on in the presentation, there was a lot of public involvement in the early days with the demand for rubberized asphalt. In fact, one of the items that we had discussed with the RTP Management Committee work group was that this was an issue that actually went to the governor's office. And so that's something that we'll work closely with ADOT, with their community outreach staff. You know, as the public provides their feedback, we certainly welcome it from jurisdictions too, as you all hear from your constituents. You know, and I would just end on the feedback that ADOT's been getting on rubberized asphalt, particularly as of late with the roadway condition, hasn't been abundantly positive. So something that we'll look into and consider moving forward.
I have one more question. It looks like the Richter grid might be something to take a look at. Also, have you considered doing a pilot on it, because it is cheaper certainly than rubberized asphalt lifespan, but yet reduces the initial reduction is greater, and the end life is the same. So it may be another one to look at. Might be a good in between trade-off.
So I appreciate the question. Who is this speaking?
I'm sorry, it's Grant again from Youngtown.
Grant, okay, thank you. John, were you able to hear that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the TRC, I think I heard most of it, and that's something that we can certainly work with ADOT and evaluate.
Okay. All right, do we have any other questions at this point? All right, well, this is an action item to recommend approval of moving forward with the Diamond Grind pilot program. Do I have a motion?
This is Robert. Yeah,
Mike from Surprise.
One more time.
Go ahead.
I was going to offer a motion for approval.
Is that Robert Yabes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
We have a
second
second
from Surprise.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And I will begin the roll call. Michael Weaver.
Aye.
David Janover.
Aye.
Scott Lowe.
Aye.
Ryan Peters.
Aye.
Jorge Gastelum.
Aye.
Timothy Oliver.
Aye.
Rob Bohr.
Aye.
Trevor Ebersole.
Aye.
Luke Albert.
Aye.
Josh Plum.
Aye.
Steve Wilcox.
Aye.
RJ Zeter.
Aye.
Paul Mood.
Aye.
Adina Lund.
Aye.
Andy Smith.
Aye.
Troy White.
Aye.
Dan Worth.
Aye.
Mike Gent.
Aye.
Robert Yabes.
Aye.
Jen Pine.
Aye.
Grant Anderson.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. All right, that's another unanimous decision. I think that's our last action and last roll call, thankfully. So I appreciate everybody and their patience, and this meeting's been going really well. So I appreciate the way everybody's been participating in the Zoom call. So that takes us to item 6, the COVID-19 traffic conditions update. And this is going to be presented to us by Mr. Wang Zhang, who's the MAG Transportation Data Program Manager. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and TRC members. So I'm going to give you an update on the traffic conditions in our region since COVID-19. I think if we talk about the traffic conditions in last month, April, I think the main topic would be reduction of the traffic due to COVID-19. As we're entering the late May, we have seen the traffic pretty much increased for almost 3 to 4 weeks in a row. So I think today's topic, we're gonna mainly talk about the reduction of the traffic and then the recovery of the traffic. So that will be the main topic point. And there's a link I'm showing on this front page that is the link that MAG maintained. We have been gathering the live traffic data and travel data in our region since COVID-19 and try to put up some matrices to help planners and decision makers for the information regarding how traffic trend has looked like since COVID-19. This website has some of the charts and infographics that we've been maintaining and updating every week. Next slide, please. Outline of the presentation, we're gonna first take a look at the traffic congestion in our region, freeway versus arterial, and we're gonna look at the traffic volume, and we're gonna look at traffic volume on freeway, on arterial, at Sky Harbor Airport, and we're gonna look at how the traffic pattern has changed in our region, and then we're gonna look at trucks. We're also gonna look at the active transportation, those non-motorized travels like bikes, walks, and round trips. And then there's some other sources of the information regarding COVID-19's activity monitoring. I will point that out later at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, first look at the traffic congestion. So we utilize INRIX speed data, which pretty much covers our region's freeway and arterial 24/7. We use the first week of March as a normal condition. As we know, that's kind of we're still in the peak traffic conditions in early March. And then starting from the second and third week of March, COVID-19 exploded, and lots of people has changed their travel pattern ever since then. So as you can see, in the normal condition in our region, the daily vehicle delay in terms of vehicle hours, we're at 70,000 hours per day, and then it has dropped to roughly 30,000 vehicle hours per day, starting from the late March and going into the April. And then starting from late April and going into the May, we have seen the traffic congestion start very slowly growing back. We've seen the most congested day since COVID-19 as last Friday, the May 22nd, but it's still not comparable to what we used to have in the beginning of the March. Percentage-wise, I think as of last week, the average congestion level is at 55% to the normal condition. So pretty much your driving experience on the freeway, for example, is very similar regardless of what time of the day or what day of the week you drive. Next slide, please. So this graphic shows, percentage of the traffic congestion drop, along a few milestones of the events. As I already talked about, traffic congestion slowly climbing back, especially what we've seen in the last 2 weeks since the lifted of the state executive order of stay at home. We have seen more people traveling, and they kind of caused a little bit of stir on the congestion, but still we're at roughly 50 to 60% on daily level as compared to the normal conditions. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is looking at the traffic congestion by freeway and by arterial. We've seen more significant drop of the traffic congestion on freeway versus arterial. So during the worst condition, or the best condition, depending on your perspectives, for example, in April, so average weekdays traffic congestion on freeway has dropped by 80%. And the worst case in arterial is only at 30%. That basically indicates such kind of reduced demand has a more significant impact to the non-interrupted traffic flow, such as traffic on the freeway. But our traffic on the arterial is less sensitive to such kind of the travel demand. For example, if you are the only car traveling on the roadways on the arterial, you still have to, there's still a chance you get stopped at intersections, right? And traffic slowing coming back, and like I said, the most congested day we have observed since COVID-19 was last Friday, May 22nd. Specifically, traffic congestion on that particular day is 41% to the normal, and arterial congestion is at 86% to the normal. Next slide, please. Okay, so next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about traffic volume and the trucks. So this map shows a few different sources of the permanent counters we have acquired data from, and big thanks to ADA and the Maricopa County DOT, City of Chandler. There's another one I didn't list it, which is City of Glendale. They all kind of give us a big help in terms of providing some continuous traffic counters data for us to do this kind of analysis. And so you can see where the data of the traffic volume and the trucks are coming from in our region for this analysis. Next slide, please. All right, so the worst, or the lowest traffic volume we have seen is on the week 6 since, COVID-19, which is the second week of April. So back then, in the second week of April, our average weekday daily traffic is at 63% of normal. Again, the normal is the first week of March for this comparison purpose. So as you can see in the graphic on the top, and then ever since the middle of April, traffic volume has been recovering, and with a fairly fast, pace. So it took us 6 months to reach to the bottom, and then we just don't know how long it's going to take us to get back to 100%. And bear in mind that the traffic volume in our region during the summertime is lower than March anyway, even without the COVID-19. So we wouldn't be back to 100% anytime soon during the summer just because of that. And having said that, the last week, what we've observed is traffic volume has been back to 81%. At some of locations, the traffic volume is back to 95% as the best case, and some of the worst case is also at 72%. So definitely the majority of the traffic is already back on the road traveling. The bottom graphic shows, how traffic trend has evolved since COVID-19 on freeway versus on arterial. So in the first half, when traffic volume goes down, and there's more traffic reduction on freeway compared to arterial. But in the second half, when traffic recovered, the recovery pace on freeway is found to be faster than the arterials. Next slide, please. Like I said, we have data source from different technologies provided by different member agencies, and we put them all together, which is shown on the graphic at the top right. So they all kind of plot out a similar trend in terms of how traffic has changed since COVID-19. And that basically indicates that we do not, at least based on the data available to us, we have not observed any particular region or area in our Maricopa region that has shown different traffic trends. So they all kind of show the similar trends in terms of going down and all the way to week 6 and start to recover since then. And we also notice every Friday during this traffic recovery, there's a spike, like a more significantly higher increase of the traffic volume on every Friday as compared to the rest of the days. We know traffic on Friday are typically higher than the rest of the weekday. We just didn't observe such kind of significant amount of the traffic observed on every Friday, ever since April. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we look at the traffic activities on freeway, by interstate and by the rest of the freeway, we notice the reduction of the travel is less to be found on the interstate, which is I-10 and I-17. So the traffic has always maintained to a relatively higher level on the interstate travel versus the travel on other, freeways such as our loop system, our State Route 51 and US 60, for example. And when you look at the ground traffic activities at Sky Harbor, they definitely see much more reduction of the travel. I'm talking about ground traffic, not the airplanes. The ground travel at the airport of the Sky Harbor has dropped by two-thirds to 31% in the week 6. And then as of last week, the traffic at the airport has recovered to 44%. Next slide, please. So we talked enough about how traffic has reduced and recovered for the last 12 weeks since COVID-19, and we wonder whether the pattern of the travel by time of day has changed, and the answer is no. So we still see two kind of peaks every day during each week since COVID-19, just in a much less degree in sometime in late March and April. So we still see two peaks, one in the PM, one in the AM, kind of standardized, standard shift we expect to see. So there's no specific time of the day during COVID-19 that we have found that people suddenly travel much more, much less, okay? So they still maintain a higher frequency of travel during two peaks as compared to the rest of the day. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is about truck travel. Heavy truck has never been kind of impacted a lot by COVID-19. As you can see in the graphic on the top, every week, the heavy truck travel has maintained very strong. As a matter of fact, they barely dropped below than 91%. So 91% is the worst. And then going to the May for the last 4 weeks, we have even seen there's more heavy truck traffic, as compared to the first week of March. For example, last week we have, 109% noticed for the heavy truck travel as compared to the normal condition. And it's a similar trend for medium truck, which is showing on the graphic at the bottom. So heavy truck has dropped to 75% as the worst case, and has been back to 90% as last week. Next slide, please. So this slide is about active transportation or non-motorized travel. So we utilize the data from a crowdsourcing source. It's a social fitness app called Strava. So basically, when lots of people doing outside activities, like they turn on this app to track their their speed, their pace, how long they've been working out, stuff like that. So we have that data secured from Strava, and they build up this kind of information for our region. The first two on the top are the ones for bike travel, and the two on the bottom are the ones for walk, hike, run travels. As you can see, comparing to 2020, which is the blue line, to 2019, which is the red lines, ever since COVID-19, we have seen a much higher activities on both bikes and the walks and the round trips in our region. Again, that might be the indication of the increase on both their Strava app users and their activities. Next slide, please. Okay, so those are the pretty much a matrix, and MAC has been put together and have that shared with everybody through our webpage. And other than that, there's lots of useful links, like like the ones being listed right here. I just want to point out two major sources you might want to check. First one is Google's mobility report, which is kind of matrix based on the usage of their Google Map app. And second one is Apple kind of produces similar things as well based on the usage of their mapping service as well. They kind of show the activity level for accessing different entities such as retail, recreational, or grocery shopping, going to park, going to workplace, stuff like that. And you can go to that website, just look at the specific information for Maricopa County in Google's, and for Phoenix region in Apple's links. So just want to point that out. Next slide, please. So this is the last slides of my presentation. Just want to do another round of shout out to Mac's webpage that we continually monitor the traffic patterns and the trends in our region since COVID-19, and all the matrices are being updated on a weekly basis. So you're welcome to go to that link or visit the MacMain website. That will lead you to that particular page as well to look at the specific traffic information or reference up till the last week. All right, that will conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions? This is information and discussion only. Okay, hearing no questions on this item, thanks a lot. And we'll move on to item 7, the update on the development of a new regional transportation plan. This is going to be presented to us by Audra Kester-Thomas, the MAG Transportation Planning Program Manager. Audra?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Review Committee. Pleased to be with you this morning to give you an update on the development of our next regional transportation plan and, of course, the extension of the half-cent sales tax here in Maricopa County. Just wanted to acknowledge that included in your agenda packet for today was an economic analysis that we had done on the impact of Propositions 300 and 400, and wanted to just point that out. Work that we did over the winter really to better demonstrate how significant 35 years worth of investments in high capacity transportation have been to the prosperity of the region and, quite frankly, the state of Arizona. We've acknowledged and recognized that we need to do a better job communicating the significance of the investments this region has made, and we'll be using this sort of information in our forthcoming educational efforts, specifically as we initiate public engagement. These graphics that you see in your packet, they're available to member agencies for your use. I know you all have several presentations you do, not just within your communities, but for civic organizations. Happy to be able to share that as a resource to you as you continue to talk about the importance of transportation throughout the region. So with that, next slide, Craig. Wanted to give you just a little bit of a review of a lot of activity that we have ongoing. I'll orient you here to our technical tasks associated with the development of the regional transportation plan. You, of course, are not new to developing transportation master plans and similar kinds of activities within your own communities. So I know you recognize how iterative this process can be. I'm going to talk really to several items that we have on the front end, heavy loaded front half of our calendar. And amid the pandemic, we haven't skipped a beat. And so wanted to draw your attention specifically here to the top of the slide and acknowledge some work that we've been doing to talk a little bit more and provide clarity, if you will, to the implementation of Proposition 400. We've produced an arterial map book and a freeway map book that outlines specifically the Prop 400 program, how it was envisioned originally in 2003 when the RTP was adopted, what we've been able to deliver out of that program, the projects that are going to be delivered in the last 5 years of that program, the projects that have been deferred or are otherwise unfunded, and any other studied improvements, especially on the freeway side of our program. This is a really valuable tool, we believe, to not only just ground truthing Proposition 400. Like myself, not all of us were around when Proposition 400 ultimately was delivered to the region. And so we found this to be an important tool, something actually your member agencies have asked for. Both the freeway and arterial program have been distributed. The arterial program map book link is included in your agenda packet this month. And we are currently in development of the transit map book, a little bit more complex and complicated of an effort, not just capital investments, as you are all aware, but the nuance in being able to tell the story about service improvements, span, frequency, and the nuanced changes that come, quite frankly, with service planning, which are a little bit harder than investments that are laid in concrete. I'll also talk a little bit more today about the call for projects and then give you an overview of how we're going to take all those information, all that ideas, the things that we've deferred out of the program, and what we'll do to sort to find the best and highest performing projects. We have a significant financial constraint burden looking ahead, and in particular notable about Proposition 400 is the financial constraint placed with the Great Recession. About 40%, we're projecting a reduction in our financial portfolio, which, as you all know, equates to real projects that we will not be able to deliver. We recognize there may be some short or long-term impacts as well related to the pandemic, and certainly won't necessarily mean a positive picture moving forward. Then I'll finally end today's presentation with a little bit of an update from public engagement and where we're heading in the near term, as well as for the portfolio of work looking ahead over the 18 months. Next slide. So call for projects. You and your staff were busy at the front end of this year, pulling together submissions and ideas for our consideration as we develop the next regional transportation plan. The submissions will be added to what we're calling our needs catalog to better articulate and identify the varying sorts of transportation needs across modes throughout the region. Next slide. So we ended up issuing the call, as you are all aware, in January. We had envisioned that to be through the end of March, but with the onset of the pandemic, extended the deadline a couple of weeks. And when was all said and done, we received nearly 1,300 individual project and program submissions. Here you'll see how they sort out by the numbers submitted, about half related to roadway and intersection improvements, and that's across facility types. So that includes freeways, highways, parkways, arterials, collectors, and below. 24% of the submissions were transit related, 17% were active transportation, and then 12% were program set-asides. These were submissions that were not necessarily specific or geographically located project ideas, but instead were the kinds and types of programs that we would potentially want to set aside funding for and issue a series of call for projects like we do now. We have a handful of other programs at MAG, as you guys are all aware of, including our Safe Routes to School or our active transportation design assistance. And so we received about 12% of the submissions related to this program set aside concept. Next slide. So here's a high level overview based on types. We are still actively working with you and your staff in making sure we understand each of the projects, cleaning up some of the data, making sure we are consistently applying the categories across types of submissions, and otherwise filling out a series of just initial data. With 1,300 submissions, you can imagine it's quite a task or undertaking. So we appreciate your staff's support in being willing to answer our phone calls as we further clarify and better understand the types and kinds of projects submitted. Here you'll see these broken out by the 3 modal categories. Roadway and intersection, by and large, you can characterize these submissions as new freeway or roadway projects. A lot of expansions of existing facilities, intersection improvements. I think we were surprised to see how many intersections were submitted, and other reconfigurations or modernization improvements. Our transit portfolio projects submitted are kind of equally balanced between expansion or enhancement of existing transit service, as well as the other half being new service or new capital as it relates specifically to high capacity transit. And then for active transportation, just a robust amount of protected investment for active transportation. You really see a shift of focus in buffered bike lanes, boulevards, dedicated active transportation investments, not as many sharrows anymore submitted as part of this active transportation portfolio. Lots of barrier breakers, as our planner Jason Stephen likes to call it, and crossing high capacity infrastructure like freeways or our riverbeds. Next slide. So what do we do with all this information? It is a robust amount of project ideas that we received, from very large to very small, and we want to be able to give care and consideration to all submissions, and like we noted, add that to our overall needs catalog and portfolio. The realities are we have a requirement to be fiscally constrained, and we have several federal requirements different really than the Proposition 400 era, for which we have a performance-based requirement to not just report out, but talk to how we're achieving the provisions that the feds lay out. It's important to remember at this point, half of the funding that comes into this region to enable our investment portfolio is federal funding in nature. And as you know, there's strings attached to those investments that we have to take care and consideration for here in the planning process, as well as the implementation of those projects. So the next slide outlines at a high level the performance-based evaluation framework for which we're using. We've been working with our management committee work group specifically on the details associated with this effort. And you'll see here just illustrative you'll see those 4 main categories for the call for projects. Ultimately, all the projects, including those we've deferred and those that we've otherwise studied, are going to flow through this effort where we identify those that are regionally significant and ultimately use those to set aside and do specific project scoring for, but then also identify regionally significant programs where some of those smaller projects may not reach a significance level at a regional level, but as part of a portfolio, our policymakers can decide whether or not that's a high priority in the region to develop a program around, not dissimilar to some that we already have here at MAG. I've noted a few, but air quality is a really good example. That modal analysis will focus on a needs-based performance assessment, really focused around the goals associated with the regional transportation plan, not dissimilar to the efforts that you conduct either in your general plans or your transportation master plans. But then once we get concurrence on that framework, we will then present qualitative and quantitative measures by which we can then score and evaluate the varying project submissions. By this fall and into the winter, we'll be able to roll those projects forward into a scenario planning effort. This will allow us the opportunity, as we discussed last year, to understand better how maybe different financial portfolios will deliver different project portfolios. In other words, we talked and provided some insight last fall that our financial circumstance really is going to limit our ability to moving big projects forward. In fact, if we retain just a 0.5-cent sales tax moving forward, at this point, our projections indicate that that's only enough funding really to fulfill the promises made of Proposition 400. What we've heard loud and clear from member agencies is if we want to even investigate a different funding portfolio, we need to demonstrate what we can achieve and what ultimately we'll be able to deliver. And I think our public wants to know that too, especially if they're the ones who will ultimately endorse a continued investment. So a lot of that will happen later in the fall and winter where we're able to apply some what if scenarios and better understand what we're able to achieve in different scenarios. Next slide. Just a quick update on public engagement. Next slide. As you can imagine, pandemic has provided a few constraints that we didn't necessarily have on our radar. The good news is that the consultant assistance that we've received really included a robust tool that we'll be able to leverage as part of the website development that will offer us a variety of virtual ways to engage with the public. And it also talks really to the times and how we are needing to find different ways to connect with the public that are not necessarily our traditional public open houses that many of us are familiar with over the course of our career. Here you'll see a much more streamlined overview of the RTP development process. You'll note that this looks a lot more simple than the technical element that I provided or schedule I provided earlier. From the public's perspective, there's really 3 main phases of feedback and engagement we seek. Here on the front end to help us identify what is really important to folks. Of course, we started that work with our values mapping work last year, but to better identify vision and priorities of our public. And then later this year to get their feedback on the varying funding scenarios and portfolios of projects that we might be able to deliver so that we can use that ultimately to develop a plan next year and come back out, present that draft plan and see if it makes the mark. Does it really resonate with our public and does it reflect the feedback they have provided over the course of the last 2 years? I will acknowledge right here that we continue to move forward on a platform that we will be able to deliver the regional transportation plan by next year. The pandemic certainly has short and long-term impacts. We continue to monitor that activity ongoing. Engaging and weighing public sentiment, especially as it relates to a public endorsement of a tax in this case, is something we are very cognizant of and include resources associated with polling and to better understand political appetite or the public's appetite rather moving forward as we see more and more uncertainty into the future related to the pandemic. Next slide. We've also landed on our brand for the plan name, Momentum. This really reflects the feedback we've gotten from our policymakers to acknowledge that unique to this region, one of the first in the country to enable a sales tax, to a local sales tax, to invest in transportation, and now a framework that's used across the country successfully, reminding the public that we are continuing good work. And with their partnership over the last 35 years, momentum continues. You'll see here some nods to the Arizona flag, some transportation elements here as well, really strong, intending to be able to show now as people engage in the planning process that familiarity with the work years to come when they'll be asked ultimately to vote. Next slide. You'll see that brand also applied in varying forums. We really think that a strong brand will help with that continuity of a planning process so that people remember now when they contribute that they had an impact on the outcome. Next slide. So just to wrap up here on final next steps, near-term next steps really, you'll see an image of our arterial map book included on this page. We are continuing to assess the RTP call for projects, submissions and data, working with several of you to make sure that we best understand the data. It is a process and we appreciate your patience. I know as you and your staff scrambled to respond to our call for projects, we're now, we have tasks now to look in and dig deep into better understanding the submissions that we received. We're also building with it our catalog of needs, which includes the call for projects, but also what we've been deferred out of Proposition 400 and what else has been planned from a regional perspective, and furthering the draft performance-based evaluation methodology through our policy committees in particular. And we hope in the early part of June to be able to launch our website and really start our public engagement process in earnest and focusing really on education and information as well. So, Mr. Chairman, that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Audra. All right, so any questions from the committee? No questions? All right, well, thank you very much. It was a very good presentation, great information, for just very fascinating information, lots to work on as you move ahead on that project. So that takes us to item 8, which is the request for future agenda items. Any requests?
Mr. Chairman, this is Scott Lowe from Buckeye.
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, with all these projections on HERF, I think it's important that we get an update on what HERF is doing beyond what the projections are, because we're all projecting a huge decrease, but I'd certainly like to see, on a monthly basis or as often as we meet, on what actually HERF is doing over the course of our recovery.
Okay, great suggestion. I think that'd be a good one to have for future meeting, on our next meeting, and thereafter some reports on the actual collections. Any other requests? All right, well, before we adjourn, I just want to give a shout out to the MAG team for getting this meeting prepared and the Zoom call ready and all the work to lead up to that. We did a run throughs and really appreciate the work everyone's done. I want to thank Tim and staff and others, everybody who's worked on that. So thank you. I want to thank John Bullen, Wang Zhang, and Audra Custer-Thomas for excellent presentations today. Great job in the presentations. And I want to thank the whole committee for your participation and for the great discussion over the Zoom call. So thank you, everybody. We're set to adjourn. The next meeting is scheduled for June 25th at 10 o'clock. And we'll see everyone then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.